Morning. It is Thursday, January 30th. That month is zoomed on by. It's Reseller Revenue Facebook group, and we meet Mondays through Thursdays live on 9 a.m. Central Time. And we meet together as a group and we discuss a set topic every single day. And then we also have other niche calls too. So today we're going to talk about our cost of goods because everybody needs to know how to track, organize, and figure up your average cost of goods sold, or we should be anyway. So if we're not, we need to pay attention and get this together because for one, tax time comes around, you need to know your total cost of goods sold. And as we are selling, how do we know where to gauge ourselves if we don't have an average? So we use the word average cost of goods sold or COGS, we'll put in lots of things. But if people ask about averages versus, this is what I spent on this item. Not a huge fan of putting in like the SKU box and stuff, what you paid per item, mostly because then we get stuck on that when we're pricing and we get stuck on that when we're taking offers. And as you've heard me say a million times before, your pricing of an item should have nothing to do with what you paid for it because that has nothing to do with the market. We are pricing for the market. If you overpaid and now you have to price below what you paid for it, because that's what the market is, that's what the market is. So I think when we start sticking the cost of goods sold where we can see it or where it's, relatively we're in our face, I think then we let it skew what we want to price things at, and that can kind of mess up our system a little bit. And an average cost of goods sold is also good because sometimes you're going to pay up for something, and sometimes you're going to get a super hot deal on stuff. So those items I get for a quarter at a church sale, they end up balancing out the $30 set that I buy somewhere else. So knowing your rolling average cost of goods sold, I believe, is just really detrimental to your business. If you use Cheryl's workbook, and if you don't have it, it is available, a link in the pinned posts in our Facebook group. It will have the average cost of goods sold rolling number up at the top. So it takes all of your items and then rolls them and gives you the average. I love that about that. You can do that in a spreadsheet too, but I think it's great. And then I always have that number. Being January, my number's been a little wonky because I haven't really been sourcing much, and the sourcing I have been doing has just been better items. So my cost of goods sold average looks really high. However, that's what it is. So that's the cash that's been leaving my business. It just is what it is. It will even out. But right now it looks a little high. And I think everybody's does at the beginning of the year, it kind of, or you could keep it rolling from last year, but I just start over every January because we have to start over, get fresh along the way. So the way I track mine is if I buy, it depends on how we source, right? So if you go to the bins and you get that big long receipt or however your bins does it by pound or whatever it is, then I would take that receipt in with you or take a picture of it or however you want to keep it so that you have the receipt. Because if the IRS audits you, they will not just go by, hey, this left my checkbook. And I only buy stuff for my business at the bins. Because they have no idea if you're buying your kid's whole wardrobe, your wife's whole wardrobe. They don't know what you really picked up at the bins. So that does not work. I know, I used to sit in on audits. You have to have the receipt or they won't like take any of the deduction. So keep your receipts. And then write on the receipt, or if you're doing it electronically, you can do it that way too. How many listable items you got at that place. Because the number of items on the receipt are not always going to be the same as our listable items. Because you might get home and something might have a bigger hole than we thought, something might be broken. Of course, we hope we source perfect, but I don't know anybody that does. So then I write, I keep a bank envelope, one of the vinyl ones in my car. That's how I keep my receipts, with a pencil because the pens don't always work when it's cold outside. And I just will real quick write, and then I will adjust that number later if I find that something has a stain or something on it. Then at least I've taken the first step. Then when I put it in my bookkeeping system, then I'll put a check mark on that receipt. That shows me that I have now recorded it in my bookkeeping system and it can be filed. So you can take pictures of your receipts. You can keep your hard copies. The IRS does accept the photo, you can take photocopies, you can take a picture as long as you have it. And you have to be able to see the date on the receipt. So I went in an audit with somebody once that they had, just because how they were folding over the stapled receipts, you couldn't see the dates. They will be disqualified because you have to see the date to be able to take the deduction. So do make sure that we are have the date visible on our receipt. If you're using cash, that is fine. Take your bank receipt from when you take the cash out. Even if you go to the counter yourself, you can get the little printout and it will have the date on it, and then write in ink. If you're going the next day to a flea market, write that date, write the town, write how many items you picked up, or at least write, I get if it's a citywide garage sale, write 8L citywide garage sales and the date, and then approximately, keep chicken scratches on it for what you bought. Or you could, if it's going to be a lot, you don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to be like there was a red polo shirt size large, nothing like that. Just this is for your records. It has to have a date, has to have that. So just write it on there, put it in your receipt. Harry says he adds the receipt to a spreadsheet while he's in the car and put it in the box, keeps in the car. If he doesn't do that, he gets lazy and loses them. Yeah, that's kind of what my banker's bag is for. And adding them to the spreadsheet while I'm in the car would be even better. So that's definitely a tip I could take from Harry, because I agree that that's really smart. And I feel like if we have a way to keep track of them in the car, we're just more likely to handle it. Some people keep a carbon receipt book in the car. They write themselves a receipt. So if they spend their cash, but make sure that that bank slip is attached to that receipt. So you can do it that way, but it's just as easy just to write it right on the receipt, in my opinion. But we have to be making sure how many individually listable items that we're picking up for what we're purchasing, because otherwise we don't know how to average it out. So if I pay $10 for 5 things, that would be a $2 average cost of goods sold. However, if I get it home and only one thing is actually listable because the rest had stains, now it's 10. So it's per listable item. I see that with the bins a lot. I see people go get, really big, big expenditures at the bins, and they'll be like, see, I had 102 items, but then how many did you list individually? Where are they? Well, one had stains, one had a hole, one, okay, well then you didn't have 102 items. And we have to get rid of vanity numbers with cost of goods sold. When we get it in our head that, well, I only pay this, I only pay that, but in real life you pay, I think it's fine to pay up for things. In fact, I'd rather see every single one of you guys pay up a little bit and get amazing items than buy a bunch of cheap stuff that is going to drag you down. So I am all for paying up, but we have to be honest with ourselves. So if we start paying up more, then we still are in that mindset of we only pay $4 for something. And so that's what my average cost of goods is. That's not right. And having that average cost of goods number, and I can tell you mine every week because I participate in the numbers call, which is at 11 o'clock today, Central Time. And so it forces me to look at that number at least once a week. And then you start to get that number in your head, whether it went up or down or whatever, and it just gives you a gauge. So if my average cost of goods sold is $4.50, which it never is. So when people say my average cost of goods sold is $4, you're probably lying and don't know. Because like mine's like 4.13 this week or something. It never seems to be very rounded off. Then in your head, if you see something for $10, it's fine to pay the $10, but at least in your head, then this better be better because I'm paying a lot more than my average. So it just kind of gives you a checkpoint, and you start to kind of live and die by that number. I don't mind paying more than that number, but it just makes me think, okay, like if my average is $4.24 and I'm getting ready to shuck out $30 for something, this better be good. And so it just gives us that check in with ourselves number. And then we need to be able to track it. Like, I don't care if you write it all down in a notebook. Do you know how many years, because my husband doesn't want to get rid of any of it, of hay filled, literally probably still has hay dust and pieces of barn stuff in it, of my husband's spiral bound notebooks that's how he, writes down feed costs. He'll write down livestock things and stuff because it was easier for him. I do everything on a computer, but I needed to make it easy for him. So if I hang notebooks up with a piece of baling twine in the shop, he will take time with and I got to tie a pencil to it too, because otherwise, then there's nothing to write with. He will take time to write it down. So we have to make it as easy as possible for what we will actually use. So if you aren't really a computer person, as much as I'd love for everybody to use that spreadsheet, it's not practical if you're never going to use it. So if you have to do it all in a notebook, or you keep it in a notebook and then we transfer it into a spreadsheet later, that's okay. I feel like we all try to push each other into these same molds. We're not all the same people. We're not all the same molds. We're not the same business. So you need to keep track of the dates. I would like you to keep track of the vendor just because if you start to see, oh, every time I order from that person, I'm only getting about half as many items as I want, and it's making my cost of goods go up because some of the items were bad. You start seeing repetition, you start seeing patterns. Like, oh, when I'm ordering online, I wonder if I'm doing a good job because my cost of goods is high and I don't feel like I'm getting that money back. Or, well, and remember, if you order something and you have to pay shipping, you need to be adding shipping in your average cost of goods sold. So if I order something for $10 and it's a great deal, but I pay 15 in shipping, now I just paid 25 for that item, not 10. So we have to add those expenses into our average cost of goods sold. Again, people I think sometimes like to lie to themselves with that number because it just makes them feel better that, hey, I'm not having to, I only spent 10, but really you spent 25 and we need to be honest about that. And I like keeping track of in Cheryl's workbook. There is a column in the expense because you have to record your expenses and you record your cost of goods sold. The cost of goods sold is bookkeeping. The expense part is your accounting. I've said it over and over and over. Bookkeeping and accounting are different things, but she provides us with both things. So in the expenses part, I will write like whenever I put in an order, I get something on an auction, I will put by that vendor ordered 15 bracelets and the date. And then when they come in, then I back that part out. I check it off because now I know it came. And then I enter it in the cost of goods sold. It's just an extra way of me keeping track of what I have out there ordered that hasn't come yet. Because everybody likes to think that we will remember. Well, I'll remember I ordered that. No, you won't. Not if you're ordering all over the place all the time. It's really easy to forget. Like, gee, didn't I order that? Where's it at? And it's like 2 months later and you never got it. So it's just an extra check. And maybe people that are younger than me and their mind's not quite as crunchy as mine is some days don't need that. But for me, it's just using the same tool I'm using for cost of goods sold to also track my orders. If I order something, let's say on Amazon for my business, then I will go into my orders, and even if I had to split it between a personal thing, which I try not to, I try to make sure I just pay with my bank account for the business. But I will go in there and either take a snippet of the order, the order placed receipt that they give you, like your order confirmation, where it shows what you paid and the dates, or I will just save the whole thing in the like your email. So I have an email folder that is just for my business expenses, and I do not put them in that folder until I've recorded it in my bookkeeping. So I know that if it's in that folder, I've recorded it already, and then I just move that Amazon order into my bookkeeping folder. And literally, if you keep up with this stuff, I make sure mine's up to date every Thursday for our call. So I have them already on Thursdays. Then literally at the end of the year, you're going to be able to go here to your accountant or whatever. You're done. You're done with your taxes by the end of the year. They're already done. So Harry says, do you include gas, meals, and cogs? I've been thinking about that for the Atlanta trips, but it'll make track. No, it's not. Those are expenses, not cost of goods sold. Technically, for accounting purposes, things like your mailing envelopes and things of that nature are cost of goods sold, but not gas and meals. They're just business expenses. So, and I would track those, Harry, because that's not hard if you're not, since it's not part of cost of goods sold, it's just an expense. You cannot include your gas though if you're doing mileage, and mileage is almost always better. It's an either or situation. Unless you've already expensed stuff off, and yeah, that gets into an accounting thing. So, but most generally that's the rule. So I feel like we need to do a really good job. If there's one thing that you're not doing right now in your business, and it's yeah, Harry, for bookkeeping, you don't, that's not part of your cost of goods sold either. If you aren't doing certain things in your business right now, this is one thing you really, really, really need to try to get a hold of. If you can't pop off with what your average cost of goods sold is to me right now, if you're full-time, so like part-timers, I get it, I get it how it's just not as critical for you to know this, but if you're full-time and this is your business, you absolutely should be able to pop off pretty darn close. And when I say pretty darn close, that's not based on our memory, that's based on our bookkeeping. Because I don't know about you guys, but have you ever entered in, like, gone on a big sourcing trip and then you come back in and enter it all in and your average cost of goods sold is nothing what you thought it really was? like had a little bit of a shocking to your system moments? Because I certainly have, where it's like in my head, I thought it was 5 and then I get it all down and it's really like 9. Like, how did that happen? Well, it's math, right? It is what it is. It's math. So, but sometimes I feel like we don't always math correctly when we're in the middle of sourcing. I think that's an everybody thing. I was talking this morning on the other call about how you guys know how I feel about death piles, and I don't call them profit piles. They're death piles. That I'm not used to running a queue over about 30 days. I don't like to ever get over 30 days. 3 weeks is about what I like to run at. But for my surgery, I went ahead and did the whole 3 months because I knew I wouldn't be able to drive anywhere. So, and I counted it up and I had 92 days. It was over $11,000 of inventory I had sitting there not listed. And I had them all in a queue. Everything was in a queue before my surgery. So nothing was just piled. It was all sorted by date, by ready to be listed. It was all ready. But it was over $11,000 sitting there. And that was for a 3-month queue. So when we start putting numbers on things, things get a little more real. And then that's when I lose people. I feel like it's like, whoa, we're not talking about the death pile and put numbers on that. What are you talking about? Like, that's not what we're doing, So, or when people are spending money, I feel like it's like I lose people. Like, no, we don't want to talk about it. Yeah, Christine.
If I am selling items that I've had as part of a personal collection for, say, however many million years, whether I acquired it for free or I bought it as a young girl, whatever, how do I incorporate that into my cost of goods?
So in your bookkeeping, it's
Mm-hmm.
0. In accounting, there is a formula, and Cheryl can like walk you through that forwards and backwards and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna put this on YouTube, so I'm not gonna give strict tax advice on here.
No.
But you do have a, for accounting tax purposes, there is a formula on how to calculate your cost of goods, so that you have something to take against that.
Okay, thank you.
For bookkeeping, it's 0.
That's what I thought, but I know there's another end of that, because when I have to go
Yep.
report, it's not quite 0.
Right.
Because I'm making a gain on whatever I'm selling. So how do I,
Yep.
I'll look
Tells
up
you how
into
it's based on fair market values and stuff like that. So, yeah, for sure. Get with Cheryl. And Cheryl's really, really good about that. She'll be on next Wednesday. No, the next Wednesday will be the 1st of the month. So
Yeah, I
the
missed her call
2nd, the 4th.
yesterday, unfortunately, so I'll jump on the next one. I wanted to ask her yesterday and I couldn't get on the call, so.
Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, just check with her and see, but there is a way to do that because for your taxes. So that's how I do it, I guess. I hope people can tighten this up and get their cost of goods. Sometimes it's a scary number people don't want to talk about, but it's a scary number that we need to talk about. Does anybody else want to chime in on either what they do or anything different than what I mentioned? Or
I have a question, Carrie. When I use her workbook, excuse me, and when I go into my cost of goods page, it does not have that rolling average cost of goods, that little box that's been there before. Do you know how to get that?
I mean, mine does. Yeah.
Yeah, and mine used to, like, my 2023 did, my 2024 did, but this one doesn't have it.
Are you
Any
sure
idea
you're on
how
the
to?
right page? That you're
I'm
not in
on my.
expenses?
Yep.
Hang on. I just pulled up a brand new one of those workbooks just in case somebody had a.
Maybe I'll just send Cheryl a message and
Yeah, it's right here
see what I'm doing wrong.
under H on the purple tab at the bottom. It's under H.
Okay. I'll look at
Mine
it
is under
again.
G. Mine's
Well, it
that
might be
number right there.
this one right here. So it's under G. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Since my workbook is blank right now, this isn't mine. This is just a blank one.
Right.
She's correct. It would be under
And
G
you're
right
under,
there.
and you're under, excuse me, expenses,
No, purple tab.
average cost of goods. Okay, that's where I was, but it's not under G. My G
Yeah,
is like,
Catherine, scroll up. See if you can scroll up a little bit. I had a hard time finding it myself.
So make
Yeah, it's
sure on the
not.
left-hand side, you see 1. Highlight line 1
Okay.
and then go over to G. Because that does, Lynn's right, that's like a,
Well, my
cost
G
of-
is a cost per piece.
right above it. Look up.
I can't go up any further. I have cost per piece. Oh, just the number in line 1.
Yeah. That's the way it's always been.
Didn't it used to be like a little box that was yellow?
No.
That's what I was looking for. Okay. Thank you.
Yipper.
I know what box she's talking about because it did used to be yellow.
But now
Was
it's
that?
green. It's still a color, it's just green.
Oh, but it was more pronounced than this is.
Yeah.
You could make
Yeah.
yours yellow if you want, I think, but
Yeah.
I would mess with, you might
What was
mess
a
with your
box?
formula.
Like a, the line was wider. It was easier to see. But
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you can do that
Okay.
too if you wanted to, but
yep.
I got it. Thank you.
yep. But those are questions you should ask, because I wouldn't want you to go through the whole year not having that number because of something silly, because the color changed and now it doesn't look as, because I get that. If it changed color, then it does look different. So yeah, but Stacia says she's on a minus queue because she needs to source, and she hasn't had enough stuff to list her goal every day. And I would rather have everybody be like Stacia than everybody overbuying every day of the week.
Yeah, I'm just like, I feel like I'm picking up a few things that I wouldn't normally pick up because I'm like so stressed that I don't have items. It's just not good. I need to
I mean, a couple week queue is great. However, it's a whole lot better to be really, really picky and to be buckled down like you are than be
Yeah.
putting a bunch of crap in our store. So
yeah.
How does that align, Carrie, with not having activity in your store then? Listing if you don't have stuff to list and you're waiting to get something
well,
good.
it's not great, but it's better than putting crap in that you'll have to deal with 6 months down the road.
Okay. Mm,
I mean, ideally we have queues or whatever, but I mean, it happens. It's better than putting crap in.
mhm.
Is the workbook suitable for those of the selling? Yeah, she has one that's like incorporates that in it. Christine, she'll ask you what platforms you sell on. They have one for, I know, for Posh and eBay. Workbook suitable. So I actually use one of the blank workbooks for farm. It works great because they have one. She actually has a workbook that's for not resellers. It works fantastic for the farm. So it doesn't have any, it's just different. It's just a little more plain. Fantastic. Anybody else have anything to chime in about cost of goods sold?
I had a couple things. I've gotten better in terms of for my bookkeeping. One of the things I implemented a few months ago, because like you said, you get items home and 2 of them you can't list, and it changes your cost of goods. But for me, with my processes, I don't often know that until weeks later. If I know it immediately, I return the item, because our Goodwills, our thrifts, the regular ones do accept returns, unless it's just, if it's one I got for $1 or $2, I just, then that's easy because I just take that out and I know it. But the way my process goes, I mean, I get them home and I take the tags off and put them in my washing machine and dry them. I often don't know that, oh crap, there's a big stain under the left armpit, or it's ripped down the side, and then I sigh and I ball it up and I throw it against the wall for my for my trash pile. But it often isn't until, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, it's like I have no idea what Goodwill trip that particular item came from. So what I started doing several months ago was just I have a little table where I keep, my scissors, my Sharpie, my, fabric shaver, all of that kind of stuff. And I just keep a little list now of items that were ruined or unlistable, just with little tick marks. And then at the end of the month, I go into on the spreadsheet, you know, if I'm doing January, like so far I have 4 for January. So at the end of January, when I transfer it over, when I do my month-long cost of goods,
Mhm.
I'm gonna take those back out. So my cost of goods will go up. But I found myself, I was just going crazy trying to keep track of
Yeah.
every little time that happened. So I think that's been, you know, that's been working okay for me, pretty good for me in that way. The other thing that I was not doing so much of was keeping track of my own clothing, my own items that I ended up putting up for sale. And I'm still not great at it, you know, because I'm not too worried about it because I know for my cost of goods it just goes in a zero. For the IRS, if I don't deduct it, the IRS is never going to get mad that I pay too much tax. You know, I sell the item for $15, and yeah, I could have deducted the fair market value, or you know, based on a formula, you know, $5 or whatever. But they're never going to get mad if you pay too much tax. I'm just missing those deductions because there were so few of them.
Right.
Because usually I would wear things quite a bit, but over the past year I lost quite a bit of weight and I changed 2 sizes. So now I'm putting more of my own items in. And so I'm just keeping on that same little sheet where I keep track of the ones that are ruined or that I end up not using. I'm also starting to now keep track of my own items and just jot down
Great.
what it is when, you know,
that's
that
good.
kind of thing. So do it
I would do,
monthly.
that's what I would tell you
Yeah.
to do too. I totally agree
Yeah.
with what Marsha's doing on that because like I have the same thing happen to me with my stuff. I'll just at the end of which this is probably really wrong, but
Yeah.
at the end of the month, I will just take one of my average buys or one of my average, if I had a big haul or something, and I'll just adjust it down by that many, you know, that had
Yeah.
flaws.
Yeah.
I just kind of guess. Life's not perfect. Life's a little messy, but it's still better than nothing. And it gets me pretty close. It kind of
Yeah.
recenters me.
Yeah. So
I
that's what
totally
I've
agree
been
with that.
doing. And I think it's working okay.
Yep, I think it's great. Um, Anybody else have anything to add with the cost of goods sold?
Yeah, I had switched at the beginning of the year to just calculate my cost of goods sold for my bookkeeping portion of it, you know, starting at 0 and just doing. However, I can't do that because I'm only essentially sourcing online 2 different items and that's it, unless something else comes up. And yet I'm trying to apply that cost of goods sold to all the other things in my store, which doesn't make sense
But it
because,
is right. That is the right
well,
way to do it.
well, okay, well, for accounting, I think, yeah. But
No, for our
for,
bookkeeping, it's the same things happen to me, Carolyn. I'm only sourcing high-end stuff right now. So my cost of goods sold number that we report weekly is insane. But whose number
okay,
are we, who, you know, it's just for you. It's a vanity
right,
number.
right.
Yeah.
But here's the problem. We're throwing out the basis of the things that we're selling now. So
Mhm.
why would you apply the basis of things that you took from last year and then all of a sudden on January
Because
1st
you're
they're going to
thinking
have a
like an
0 basis?
accountant.
Well, but that's accounting. That's not
Right. So for
bookkeeping.
your accounting, you're correct. Our bookkeeping rolling cost of goods, average cost of goods number is
Yeah,
bookkeeping. So
right,
for that, it's about all about our expenditures, our
right. So
money out the door.
right. So I'm for my bookkeeping portion of it, of managing my business, nothing with the IRS.
Right.
I know that my rolling cost. So I had it originally thrown out my beginning and reset.
Hmm.
I can't do that because it makes absolutely no sense because then all of a sudden on January 1st, my business that I'm managing all of a sudden is starting to have, instead of a net profit of, you know, $25, I'm having a net profit of $4
That's the
because,
money going out.
but,
That's your true money going out number.
but then you're using assets or inventory. You're not throwing those out.
But that's for accounting.
Right, right. But we're talking bookkeeping.
That's what I say. But what you're saying is accounting. You're talking about bases and inventory from before. That's an accounting number. Your rolling cost of goods number is just about what's leaving the door. So
Right. So I'm
you're trying to apply that number with old inventory. That's accounting. And you're totally right with what you're saying on the accounting side of it. For the bookkeeping, that you need to keep that average cost of goods true to what you're spending, because that's a spending number. And that is what you're spending right now. It's
That's what
not,
I'm
it doesn't have anything to do with applying a basis. That would be for your accounting.
Okay. For me to really realize what I'm actually selling and what the true thing is that I'm actually making profit on it, whether I'm not making profit or not, because then all that does is say that all those things that I bought last year were all bad buys then, because now I'm only making $4 profit as opposed to $25 or $30 profit. That doesn't make sense to me
This is a
in running
number
my
bothering
business.
you. It's bothering you,
Well, yeah, it does bother me because it doesn't make
but it
sense
is
that
a
all
true
this,
number.
then
That
why don't you
number's for
throw,
what's leaving.
well, then we shouldn't be tracking then things that are selling this year that we bought last year if we're throwing out the basis for last year.
But there is no basis in that number. If you're
But
doing
the,
your
but
accounting, it is, yes.
Yeah.
For your, it's an expenditure number, so it makes us feel better if we change it, but it is what it is. I get
I
it. I
don't,
get what you're saying, but you know what you spent. You know how it is, but I'm just saying I wouldn't, math gets pretty fuzzy when we change it.
right. Well, for me to understand that, yes, all these things that I'm selling this year were not horrendous buys, because now all of a sudden the net profit's only $4. I'm keeping the running balance as opposed to saying, well, all the things that are selling now had a basis now of a cost basis of $23. That doesn't,
We're
that
not
doesn't make,
talking, you're a professional accountant. So there's no cost basis. That number, the average cost of goods, is not a cost basis. It's how much money is leaving our wallet. I get totally, because I do accounting. I'm an accountant too. You're stuck on it. It's not like it's not the same as writing that number off as a basis. It's not the same number, but I totally, I understand where you're coming from on it. It's to show the money leaving. So you also need to be able to tell when you're overspending on these high-end items. It's a number leaving. It's not a basis. We're not talking about the same thing. I get what you're saying. It's to make you feel better about your net profits per week. I get it.
well, it's to have a better understanding of, um, yeah, okay, well, here's the deal. So I sell 20 or 30 items this week. I've only bought one,
Mhm.
and I'm going to take that one thing that I've sold and apply the cost basis to everything that's sold this week.
For the whole
Well,
month, so as your months go, it's going to get better. Mine is really high right now because I'm doing the same thing. I'm not really sourcing right now. So my number is really high because the couple things I have sourced were stupid expensive. So right now it's a little gray. Yours, it evens out as you
well,
keep
mine,
going.
well, here's the deal. Mine will never even out this year because I'm not sourcing from stores. I'm sourcing maybe one or two things an entire week. And I'm trying to take that basis of things that are upper echelon and try to apply that to things that that even didn't even cost me that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and like I said, it's just a number. It's to me, it's making that isn't, like I said, it's just about what's leaving your wallet, and we're not applying it as like we're taking it away from what you already bought. But I get what you're saying about how it makes you feel with so if you wanted to leave your number from last year and keep it rolling with this one and just add in these numbers, if it makes you feel better about the net profit per item, then add these numbers into it
But
and
Yeah,
keep
wouldn't
I
it
think,
going from.
but wouldn't that be the true net profit per item? I mean,
yeah, because
okay, so I guess my question would be, because I'm kind of with Carolyn on this.
If
If
you're in accrual accounting, yes.
well,
oh,
Cash accounting, no.
here's the difference. I think because I don't operate the way 99% of the people do
Mhm.
in the call, because I'm not sourcing. You know,
Correct.
let's go to the extreme and say I'm not going to source anything this year until I actually get my my inventory down
Mhm.
to nothing. So if I were to do that and I could go the entire year without it, well, for accounting purposes, I'm sorry, let's say tax purposes. So for the IRS, it's going to make perfect sense that I had zero cost of goods sold this year. I sourced everything from it, so everything's going to be taxable. I'm fine with the IRS portion with that. I'm not replenishing the way everybody else is of going out to the store every single week to go ahead and get it. But to say, if I bought one item, for $50 or $60, and to say, well,
I
Carol,
get what
every
you're
single,
saying.
yeah.
I get what you're saying. I get
So
what you're saying totally. And it's just yours is a little, it's gonna
it's extreme. Right.
Right.
That,
It's an extreme circumstance. And
and
my
that
job is just to say how it is
for,
bookkeeping, accounting correct. Like here's
right.
bookkeeping, here's accounting. And because I know it is correct. Does it mean it looks really skewed when you do your numbers every week? Yes, it does. And so, but because you do have an extenuating circumstance, I would agree with you,
Yeah. That's what,
choose to want to roll those numbers and just keep 24 going and then absorb, because there's no rule that says you have to start over in January, right? There's
right.
no
Right.
rule. You could keep your rolling average from 2024 and just keep rolling it into 2025 and not do a reset this January.
Right.
That
Because
would
on,
not be incorrect
for my situation, for
for
everybody else,
your
I think,
situation.
right. Because for me to sit there and to be able to say, well, I'm going to take an offer on this, and I know we're not supposed to base our offers on what we purchase things for.
Right.
I totally get that. But realistically, it's not like I paid, $25, $30 for
For each
something that
one.
I know doesn't have that worth, or, you know what I
Right.
mean? So for me, I think my numbers got skewed, and it will never even out this year because I am sticking to that plan of never sourcing unless I have a $35 profit, $35 profit for my item online, which means I'm essentially buying almost nothing this year.
Right.
I have that in my head, and that's my rule, and I'll stick to it. But for my unique situation, because I was so stupid and have 2 years worth of inventory, that's the ultimate. That's the bottom line of it. I was so stupid that I poured all my money into inventory, and it's sitting there. This how stupid, like you said, you had $12,000 sitting there,
For
and that
92
gets to
days. It
you.
was crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and okay, multiply that by 1,000.
Mhm.
That's
But I
my
get it. But you
situation.
also see where I have to,
Yes,
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 Carolyn absolutely is an
yeah,
exception to the rule in this.
yeah.
But then you get everybody else going, but I have an exception. No, like you really
No,
do. I do really get it. But then I would tell
right,
you, if I was your bookkeeper, I would say,
right,
then let's take 2024 and keep going with that number.
right.
Not
Yeah,
just, we can't just make up but you rolling 2024 makes sense. And I
yeah,
totally knew the path that Russell was going down, and he was going to go down an accrual accounting mindset, which we're not
right.
going to do because it's going to confuse people. And I know
It's
you
cash
see that
basis,
too.
right?
You
And I
can't do it.
totally get it.
No,
The
I wasn't looking at accrual. I don't care about the accounting part. The accounting part is
Mhm.
January 1st to December 31st, period. That's the accounting part. But for making decisions and knowing how I'm doing, I think rolling it over and a continuation,
For the
I
number
mean,
from 2024.
I mean, that's the more accurate way for your day-to-day operations.
It depends on, so it does. And if you do it one way or the other, it doesn't really matter. I reset in January because my business has changed a lot from last year. So I feel like I'm going to get a better accurate picture of what I'm doing this year, starting over.
Well,
If you
okay.
don't feel that way, then there's nothing wrong with doing rolling from 2024.
No, I
I
guess,
think
but
I think
from my standpoint, I'm just looking at it as if I bought a 500 items last year
Mhm.
and I spent $500, I got a dollar cost of goods. If January 1st I start my cost of goods completely over again and I don't buy anything for the whole month of January and I sell 100 items, I have a zero cost of goods on all my items.
And have a huge net profit for your bookkeeping. Yes.
But
For
how's that?
bookkeeping.
But how's that? I mean, why does a certain date just automatically, like, I didn't shut my business down and start over?
You know what? Part of
That's
it's
what
just
I don't
because of
get.
how, for one, software works, right? That's a big part of it, is because we start our books over. And like, so even in corporations, some of them roll and some of them they reset. And it as just like a corporation, you have to decide whether you want to roll or whether you want to reset. I don't think there's any right or wrong um way to do it. And if yours is better, I wanted to reset January 1st because I totally see what Russell's saying, just because I want to get a clear picture on for this year or whatever. But because it has changed so much. I think mine would have actually been lower, my cost of goods sold, if I kept rolling. I think it would, and I don't, because of how I want to look at it, I feel like I'm going to get a better picture of how my business is this year if I started over. But if you rolled from 2024, totally fine. Totally see your point in that.
yeah, I think that people who are at that nirvana, it's
Mhm.
10,000% accurate for what you're doing. For
Yep.
somebody like me who has essentially screwed myself over for years by buying so much inventory and not listing it. I can't even get into the same mindset. And let's even put aside the fact that I sell new with tag and nobody else does. You know
It
what I
is
mean? So
different.
it's totally different for it.
The
So
cost of goods is different.
yeah.
And like what I'm looking at, so I knew my cost of goods would look lower than what maybe I'm doing right now if I kept rolling it, and it would take a long time for that ball to get back up. But if I started over, I'm gonna have a more accurate picture of 2025 because my cost of goods sold is higher. So it would have made me feel better on a week-to-week basis to roll it, but it probably wouldn't have been super accurate for where I'm at right this minute. But it's just a choice whether you want to do it, as long as as long as you are keeping it accurate and it's got a basis. So your basis of this whole how you want to do it would be 2024's, and as long as we keep adding your higher cost of goods to it and
Right.
keep it going, then it's still accurate. But
Yeah,
you see, because you are an accountant, you see how like when you're giving advice, blanket advice, because we're not all the same,
right.
but for the most part in accounting and bookkeeping, 99% of people, we are the same.
Right. Then
You could
that's
be
what
an
I
outlier.
and that's what I'm striving for. I'm striving to get to the point where I only have 2 weeks worth of inventory there, and then it totally makes sense that you're having an accurate view of what's going on. But for myself, and I don't recommend it for anybody else, it's because nobody else is in my situation that they have a warehouse full of stuff that's not listed. So I totally
Oh, I
agree.
think there probably is, Carolyn.
Well,
But I do see it's because some people go to, so yeah, exactly what Larry said. So there's totally different, like for me, I know my business is different this year and I want it to accurately reflect that. Yours is different this year for a whole different flip-flop reason, right? It would be wrong for you to keep taking your cost of goods sold from 2024, spending the higher cost of goods sold and not adding it in. That would not help you.
right.
But as long as you started your basis off correct, I totally get what you're saying. And you also understand that when you say words like basis, you know where my mind goes.
I know.
It's just different, but I
and
totally see where you're at. So
yeah, I'm not trying to confuse people and you try
I
to
don't
talk
think you are
above them or
either.
anything like that. I'm just trying to say, if there's somebody in the unique situation that I am, that you have thousands and thousands of items that you've paid for, and then all of a sudden you're not buying anything at all. Again, extreme measures. We're talking the
It is.
pendulum swinging both ways. If there's anybody in that situation, and you've made the decision that you're not going out buying stuff, it just wouldn't give you a true figure for it, and that's kind of unique to me, and I totally
And you
understand that.
don't have to, there's no rule that you have to start that rolling number over.
Right.
Like Russell said, who just says that? Well, for one, software says it. For me,
software. Yep.
right. It's mostly software based. And even for corporations, it's the same way. It's because this computer system does it. But if you keep it going, you have your own spreadsheet or whatever, and you haven't drastically changed your business this year,
yeah,
it's fine. It's not wrong. But like let's say Larry. So Larry is kind of transitioning some. Let's say Larry keeps transitioning to jewelry, right? I wouldn't want him to hang on to 2024's rolling number so much.
Right.
Because his business is changing in 2025, and I want that to accurately reflect that for his decision making. And just like me, I know mine's different.
Plus, if I wanted to compare, I might use both sets. I mean, if I wanted to compare things from like large hard goods that I'm selling today relative to a year ago, I would keep those numbers. But if I'm going to focus on going forward with predominantly jewelry or some other niche, then I'd want to use the different numbers. It all depends on what you're trying to do and what you're comparing.
Well, like Carrie said, many companies use fiscal years different than the calendar year. They absolutely do. It's all about picking that date, right? And their date, I hated working in fiscal year accounting, by the way. Hated it. I don't know why it messed with my head. But yes, and so it's just picking that date and deciding how you're going to use it for your business. And if Carolyn sees it's gonna, it's not Carolyn's not trying to like trick herself, but what, that's why when I told her one way is right, one way it is wrong for 99% of the people, but we all have outliers and we have different goals in our business. So I totally get what she's doing, and that's right. But for the most part, and when Devin said the bookkeeping versus accounting's like who's on first, I'm like, no, it's pretty black and white. Carolyn understood it was black and white too. It's just she's in a different situation, so I get it.
It is, and it's just because to effectively manage and make rational decisions about what I'm doing this year, I had to go to an extreme. I had to say, no more buying, 9 items for an entire month is nothing,
Yeah, for sure.
when I was buying hundreds before. So to me, to finally get to this position and have this rule, I have to be able to say, well, I understand that rule, but I'm also going to be able to make decisions in what I offer, what offers I take and things like that in my mind to manage, which is totally different from keeping the books and stuff like that. So for me, it just doesn't make sense. But for everybody else, I totally agree with it. So this is about what's working for me. That's what was working for me this year, to have an accurate way to decide what I'm doing with my, accepting offers and things like that. So.
And
Okay,
we do have
thanks.
to make
Didn't
exceptions.
mean to hijack it and
No, and I
throw
wasn't
everybody
trying to
off.
be sticky at you. It's just,
I know.
it's a blanket advice thing, right? Like you
Yes.
have to go one way or the other, but I get what you're saying. You're not wrong. And anybody that wants to keep their 2024 to keep rolling, that's fine. It's not wrong either. I just
It's
flip
be
mine over.
consistent. It's just being
Yes.
consistent. That's all. So, yeah.
But yeah, you can't like pick and choose based on how you want your numbers to look. As
Right.
long as you're
right.
consistent, there's nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
Yep. I want mine to, my net profit per number would be way higher if I went off the 2024, but I know accurately reflecting mine's 2025. And you just like anything else, we got to pick it to make our business change, as long as we stay consistent. Anybody else have anything with their cost of goods sold or how they're figuring it or doing it, or questions? I think big auction lots are rough sometimes with cost of goods sold. They're not rough. They're just, you have to keep on the ball if you are ordering in lots, because it's so easy to like forget, for one, that they even came, and for another, to make sure that you are taking time to go through it and put like, here, this stuff's all going in a lot. So that's one item. And then here's the stuff that's individually listable, and making sure that we go back to the correct invoice to put that in. At least it's hard for me. I have
Yeah,
to
if I
really,
don't count my items right away when I go to the bins, because I go to the bins once a month for clothing, I got to count it all when I get home and
Yep.
put it in immediately. But then when I'm listing the items and it's under the bright light, I might notice, so then I have to make sure to go in that same, I notice a flaw and okay, I'm not going to list that item. It's too flawed. I have to go back into my bookkeeping and make sure that I am keeping track of that wasn't an accurate number, because I might end up taking out 10 pieces out of 200. So, who
well,
knows?
at least you only make one trip. You're not making a trip every day. So at least
Right.
if you're sourcing a lot, like what Marsha's doing, is probably the next best thing. I
Yeah.
agree. I do the same thing with jewelry as she does. I do a hashtag type system. I keep a little marks or whatever. Life's not perfect, but yeah, what Harry said's right. Opening the boxes and looking through them and getting them is fun. And then remembering to add them to the spreadsheet. And also, you know what else is not fun is when you get a big lot and you have 3 things staring at you that out of a box of like 50 that weren't, the rest wasn't good, and you have to admit to yourself, gee, now my cost of goods was like $30 because I screwed up and should never bought this lot. That's not fun either, but that's really those are the times it's super important and would be very reflective on our sheet, because you're going to have to stare at that line and remember that happened. And that's really good for us, but it's harder for us to enter it in and then come to like the numbers meeting and have to be like, yeah, my net profit was like -7 because, I screwed this up. But that's just part of it, right? We learn and we do better next time, type of thing. Yeah. And Larry, as you get processing, especially big batches of jewelry, that gets easier.
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten into what helped me a lot was, and this would apply for anybody with any niche, is I only handle things one time. I don't sort, I don't play with it. I don't sit and go, maybe I want this, I take it out of the box or the bag or whatever. And if it's going to get listed, it goes into my day queue bag. And if it's not, it goes to the box for the lot. And it just helps, because at the end, your lot box, unless you're making small lots, which some of us do, I also, at the end of that box, whatever's out, that's all I make my little lots with, because otherwise my lots have babies, and then my baby lots have babies, and then I end up with just boxes of crap everywhere. So if I only handle it once, And do I cut out some profit for the fact that if I only have 3 random things and they don't go in a lot, then they just all count as one and they go to the big jump box? But it saves me so much headaches in the end.
So you've
Because
just got 2 classes of items, the individual
it lists
sellables and
3.
then everything else.
3. I have 3. So as I'm little lots, I'll make little lots. I'm not opposed to little lots. I just don't let them breed. So I don't put them aside to make little families and to keep having more and more and more and go, well, when I get enough bracelets, when I get enough of this, because then I just feel like they multiply and then I never get to making those little lots because it sucks and it's not fun. So I never get to it. And so I had to take that part out because I was really just piling stuff up. And that was me problem. Maybe nobody else has that problem, but I had a me
I
problem.
definitely have that problem. I'm trying to figure it out because I've
Yeah.
touched some of this stuff 3 times now,
Yeah, I'm
and I
not doing
still got
that
to go through
anymore.
it again.
I
Yeah, I
haven't
can't do
touched
that.
it 3 times, but I toss it in the, batch box. And then I hate listing batches. So it sits there and then I keep tossing more in. And it's just now a really big box of
And
crap.
that's why I made it so like last night, right? And said, so I found a lot on eBay. There was 2 lots by the same seller. Seller had like no feedback, maybe like 3 or something. It was like terrible pictures. Said it was from his mother's estate, which everybody says that in jewelry and then usually lying. But one whole lot was all rings for $9.99, and the other lot was $24.99, I think it was, for the lot of the rest of the jewelry. And it had like 50 watchers on it, right? So I'm thinking, obviously I'm missing something, or why are all these watchers on it and nobody's scooped this up, right? Like what's wrong with it? There's something. So of course, I made an offer because I couldn't, chuck up the $24.99. And so I made offers on it. They took them and I got it last night. It was like really good stuff, like really good stuff. So I think I let myself get influenced by like, well, there's lots of watchers. Why wouldn't somebody else bought this if it was such a cheap deal, and I went in and did it and it was really good. But when I sit here and I was unboxing it, I take individual listed items that go in a day queue. But we all end up with stuff that's left, right? If it's broken or has a problem, whatever, it automatically goes into where my large flat rate boxes, it's just junk. The stuff that's listable, but not, it's like $14 listable. Then whatever I had left last night out of that haul, then I paired those earrings together. I paired those bracelets together. And if I didn't have anything that made a sensible lot, then it went to the large flat rate box. Because in all honesty, is that mess worth that I could have squeezed another couple bucks out of it? It's not to me anymore. It might be to some people, and that's totally fine. To me, it's not worth having a bunch of that junk laying around anymore. Because it gets worse before it gets better, Larry. Let me tell you, you start getting a couple 100 pounds running around, and you can end up with like, oh, there's a box of and then you just stare at these boxes that keep multiplying. And then what do? You throw 3 or 4 of them, 5 of them together, and you get 15 bucks out of them, 20 bucks out of them. Is it worth it? It's not worth my mental real estate more than anything.
Yeah, well, the box is multiplying. I definitely can appreciate that. I lost an item. I had to cancel an order because I couldn't find it. But in the course of me looking for it, I went through every single box that I have, and it turns out I was finding 5 pound, 10 pounds of previously sorted boxes in the weirdest places all over the place. And I threw them all into, I categorized them by the type and I pulled out the name brand stuff. And,
Yep.
and there I've touched them all again.
So I was same as you, Larry, for like 2 years. So I feel you, but I've just gotten to now I only want to touch it once and it goes right into a queue, a junk box, or a small lot right that minute. And that small lot then goes straight to the day queue. So there's no in between of building new ones. I just put it right to the day queue. That's what works for me. It doesn't mean that's what works for everybody, but I was accumulating too much crap. And I will say, Larry, for jewelry, if I would have done my inventory system like how like Lynn has hers, which is how mine is now, if I would have done that from day one, my life would have been so much easier. But I didn't because I don't know. And I think Catherine does the exact same one too. I think we all do the same jewelry inventory system. Highly recommend it. I so wish I would have done it sooner. But for a while I had like brooches or I had necklaces and they were just like in drawers. And I thought, no big deal. Well, then they scratch each other for one. You don't realize how bad they scratch each other, but they do. And then for another, you keep building in there and then you can't find things and I don't know. And you drop things and I don't know. I highly recommend getting a good jewelry inventory system sooner than later. it will
And
save
for
you.
you, that's by day, and you throw the 25 things for that day in that one
No,
spot.
every single piece of jewelry is individually skewed for me.
Oh, good. Yeah, that's the way I'm doing it too.
Yeah, like here's
And they're in
like so
bags.
every single one of
Yep.
mine, and then you
Yep.
just line them up. So it is really chronological, but it doesn't have the date actually on the bag.
Right.
Christine.
Sorry, I had the opportunity, and I'm not embarrassed to say, but I am at the same time because it's inventory that's going to serve me well now that I'm getting to it. But I had the opportunity a couple of years back to do some bulk buys, and just because of personal circumstances, I wasn't able to address it at that particular time. So it's wonderful. It's sitting very neatly in my home, boxed up, ready for me to do what I got to do, which I will. I mean, I have an idea. I mean, I know what I paid, but it came in lots. So now, fast forward to 2025, as I'm starting to go through these, am I assigning an average cost of good? Because this is going back now. It's just in boxes. The sale happened already. So moving forward, as I take these individual items, and there's no throwaways. It was a handpick, so I know everything has a value. But how am I doing the valuation for my average cost of goods now as I pull, if you know what I'm asking you, for something that I purchased 2 years ago?
I'm sticking to my guns on this one. You don't.
Okay, that's what I just make sure. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure I heard correctly.
So I get what I said with Carolyn, and I agree with that. But like, in lots of us have things like that. I have huge big buys I did last year. I'm definitely selling them right now. That doesn't change my cost of goods.
So you just set to zero on that because you don't. I mean, like
Well, it wouldn't be an entry at all, because so you're listing it. We don't enter each thing that we list
right.
in our average cost of goods. It's our money that's leaving the business.
Okay.
So no money is leaving the business. For accounting purposes, that's different. But for your average cost of goods sold, there's no entry because there's no money
Right.
leaving
And
the
like
business.
I said, I made the buy 2 years ago. So the money left the business 2 years ago. So I can't worry about that now. That's what I was just trying to get at. So I'll just
Correct.
address it. Okay. That's what I thank you.
Yep. And Harry probably has a very different inventory system. His stuff's really big, so that would be a little bit different. But I agree. Having labeled the lots probably really helps. He's got really big things, so it would be hard. He's not sticking his in a 4mm jewelry bag for sure. Clothing call is right after this one here in just a few minutes. And then serious sellers calls right after that. So Larry will be there to help you through that. I'll get my numbers in. For those of you that have been following me from the beginning, you guys will know how badly I want my 90-day number to start with a 5. And I was within $150 last night of it being 50,000, and I didn't make it. And I was like, darn it. No, and then it resets, after midnight or whatever. And I'm still just off like 500 or 600. I could do it today, but I would really, it's a vanity number, I know, but I've always wanted that 5 in front of my 90-day total.
When you get there, you have to make a post in the group so we know.
It was sad. And I had somebody that had 15 unpaid items in their checkout, and I'm like, come on, pay, and they didn't till this morning. So I just want to share that with you guys because you guys have cheered me on it. I forget about where we've all come from and how much growth we've all had, because until Harry says things like, yeah, I remember when we were really excited that you hit 25, and then I'm like, it brings you down to check, like, we are growing, we are doing things, but because we're all growing together and we're all doing things together all the time, we don't see sometimes until we take a step back from our own businesses, how much each and every single person has grown so much. So take a chance to step back and pat yourself a little bit today while I cry about my 5. All right.